Hello, welcome everybody to the Query Elevate Your SecDataOps game with Query and Amazon Security Lake webinar. I'm John Rao. That's Ross Warren. I'm VP, Distinguished Engineer here at Query.ai, the security federated search company. And Ross, I'll let you introduce yourself to these fine folks.
Thank you very much, sir. Ross Warren, I'm the product SA on the Security Lake team. Been here 6.5 years. Talked to tons of customers and partners all about Security Lake all day long.
And you're about to learn some more about Security Lake. So the run of the show today is we'll go through a real quick deck. We probably won't even talk about all the slides. We'll be yapping about SecDataOps. Then we'll do some quick demos, just kind of the old way of how you would execute some of these searches within Athena. Of course, there's limitless amount of searches that you could do because there's a lot of data in the Security Lake. And then we'll go over and I'll do a live demo of the query instance and hopefully it won't crash and burn. But we're in a demo, so it probably will. But we'll have fun regardless. And then if there's any questions that come in from the various channels, we'll take them at the end, and we're contractually obligated to answer any of them, except ones that'll make people at AWS mad. So with that, let me get situated here and start this sharing process.
Are we contractually obligated to answer any brisket questions?
Yes, we are definitely
Yeah.
contractually obligated to answer
Okay.
those. Let me put this in full screen mode. And you already know what we're here to talk about, and you already know us. So, Ross, I will let you take it away, sir.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. We're going to talk a little bit about some Security Lake for the first couple slides, just kind of level set what the whole ecosystem is. And as John said, we'll then dive into what Query does. We're seeing a lot in the market as we talk to more and more customers, as we were building Security Lake, a lot of challenges. And lots of folks were like, I'm done with having my data storage sitting next to with managed by my SIM, right? It was great for a while, but as I want to move away from my SIM or I want to take the data out of the SIM, it becomes complicated. It becomes interesting. It becomes a project and not just something very, very easily. Um, as folks may or may not know, right, S3 is very, very cheap, very, very durable storage. And so let's think about using S3 as our long-term data retention. Customers also may have a lot of stuff in their SIM or in their products that are consuming logs and data, but it's not necessarily on top of the SIM that they want to keep doing those things. And that goes back to getting the data out, thinking about those things. And also, customers are kind of moving away from, I don't want all my alerts and my detections and everything on my SIM. I may have some other ways or processes or logs that just don't fit in my SIM. And so I've got to figure out, how am I going to continue to decouple that data storage from what my SIM is, what my analytics are doing. And then that deeper dive, that threat hunting, that investigation that may have you searching across lots of data for a single IP address, or a single, bad actor or something in those lines. SIMs are great at near-term data, some horizon, 7 days, 30 days. But there's a lot more use cases of doing those deep dive, those threat hunting into longer term data. We've got an S3. Well, we want to be able to search it. So go ahead and next slide. As we were working on what was Security Lake going to be, we AWS were thinking about, right, what standard are we going to need? What standard are we going to use in Security Lake? At the same time, other partners were thinking about the same thing, how to go to the next version of what they were using for their common information model, for their normalizations. Fast forward year plus, OCSF, Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework. Now, it is an open source project. You do not need to be an AWS customer to use OCSF. But when we start talking a little bit more about Security Lake is all OCSF underneath. And I believe Jonathan will probably say the same thing about that. Lots of great information, lots of great excitement around OCSF. And Jonathan has got a lot of good work and knowledge, in the open source community. You want to talk a little bit more about OCSF, Jonathan?
Yeah, for sure. So I remember those early conversations when Security Lake was just a code-named project, but we won't get into that. And if you think back to normalization in AWS, we had the AWS Security Finding format that was used in AWS Security Hub, something I contributed a lot to. I know you worked with us when you were on the detective team coming in from Squirrel. And then, of course, we had Eli running the show back at that time. But OCSF is, an important milestone, I feel, for the entire security and security data operations kind of industry as a whole, right? Because it not only gives you something that's easy to normalize into, it has a rigid set of standards as far as constraints, um, hierarchy within the schema itself, so you could model a bunch of different things. And I'm glad that you brought up that AWS, not equals OCSF, right? I think that's a common misnomer that you see folks talking about the data model. They're like, oh, well, Elastic has um, Elastic Common Schema, ECS. Then you have Splunk with KIM or SIM, however you want to say that, the Common Information Model. And then a lot of times you're like, oh, the Amazon OCSF. And it's like, no, not at all. There's over 90 contributors. We have folks from IBM, from Atlassian, Amazon, Splunk, Cisco, Hunters, Tenzier. The list goes on and on. Tons of contributors, myself included, Jeremy, our CTO here at Query as well. But what it does give you is something that's, I don't want to say easier to search, but a lot more approachable to search with, right? Where instead of having to guess where, hey, is IP address called IP address all caps? Is it snake cased? Is it Pascal case? Is it camel case? Or are they calling it IPv4 address, IPv6? You have, a common place to put that and then search for it, which makes consuming and normalizing into it a lot easier.
Yeah. This being able to search easier is just what normalization is. And before, back in the day when I had a lot less gray hair, um, I remember queries that you were aliasing source IP address, as you said, 3 different ways just to get the same thing out of it. Um, yeah, go ahead. Next slide. I had something else to say about OCSF, but I completely forgot. Maybe it'll come
It's
to me.
great.
It's great. Um, yeah, it'll come to me. So, what is Security Lake? Right? We've been talking about the challenges of separating, data storage from your analytics platform, your SIM. Um, and so we announced Security Lake over a year plus ago. And it really is a managed service that makes it really, really easy to bring in AWS logs. And we have pipelines and we have programs that help bring in other partners. And then controlling who can write data to Security Lake and also controlling who can consume data from Security Lake. Typically, if you've built a data lake before and you 100% have got it all in one bucket in one region, which was not the case for many times, and it's in the same format, which usually is not the case, who has access to it? It was the wild, wild west, right? And we're not sure. How do we control access? Security Lake is helping us do all of that. Um, when I'm talking and I'm mentioning AWS services here, you don't ever have to go to the IAM console, the S3 console, SQS console, Event Bridge console, Athena, Lake Formation, Glue. You don't ever have to do any of that to collect your VPC flow logs across 1,000 accounts across 13 different regions. It is 4 button clicks to have that happen. Think about how you've had to do that in the past. And I won't walk through the pain for every single VPC, but find your EC2 instance, go to VPC, pick a bucket, pick what formats I want it in. Is it a cross account bucket? There's a whole bunch of things that we do for you. We're not hiding any of it. This is all in your account, but we're managing it for you. You can go look at the rules, the permissions that I make for you Um, some folks are used to going to build a policy. I have to usually make them back off and say, no, go look at what Security Lake will build for you. If it doesn't work, come to me. Let's then work through what that happens, which is kind of what Jonathan and I did very, very early on when Query AI was working on becoming a Security Lake partner. He remembered how to do it the old way, and I'm like, drag him over. Look, Security Lake is now giving us this. If this doesn't work, let's tweak it for you. So, um, any comments, Jonathan, or we can go to the next slide.
No, I mean you hit the nail on the head. It's a lake in the box, right? And for anybody who has any exposure to doing this, quote unquote, the old way, building an analytics program using the AWS Glue data catalog, Amazon Athena as your distributed query engine, it's hard. I mean, just some of the log sources in Security Lake, I tell customers and prospects all the time, or even people who aren't, associated with query, don't want to give us their money, that hey, if you're like mass logging, you want retention, you want to someday open up your SecDataOps program to analytics, to different statistics, just to regular reporting. If you're looking at lakehouse architectures, even if you're going to move it out ultimately from SecLake or S3 to something like a Databricks or Snowflake or your own ClickHouse or otherwise, like turn Security Lake on for the hard stuff, like centralizing VPC flow logs, centralizing Amazon Route 53 DNS query resolver logs, even EKS audit logs centrally across different flow log configs and CloudWatch log subscribers and whatnot, and then building your schemas on top of it. Like that's mind-numbingly hard to maintain and to even deploy, even though there's a ton of patterns for it now. SecLake is, I mean, the best thing I could say. It's an easy button for log sources, and everything else is kind of in your hands from there.
We were on stage with a customer, and they had a slide that was before Security Lake and had all these lambdas all over the place and all this code, and then they flipped to after Security Lake. They got rid of all the lambdas. They were happily deleting code for those old patterns to collect AWS logs. And when we announced WAF logs, they within less than an hour they had configured and were collecting all of their WAF logs into Security Lake. And they actually commented on stage, it was so easy, we thought we did it wrong. Huge plus, huge accolade for that.
Yeah.
But go Google Security Lake and Torque Robotics if you want to see it. It's a public video. All right. I kind of hinted at some of this. Security Lake has sources. So any of the AWS logs that we've mentioned, also any any findings coming into Security Hub, or when you click the button to do Security Hub integration, all those are going to come into from ASSF, Amazon Security Finding Format, to OCSF easily. So whether it's an AWS like a Macy or an inspector that goes to Security Hub, or any of the other partners that you've got configured pushing findings to Security Hub, those are going to come into Security Lake also. And we'll get to what source partners are in just a minute, but that is a very, very big part of the story, is being able to bring custom sources, we're calling custom right now, partner sources, into Security Lake. Today, you've got to do your own ETL, or you can work with some other partners that can do the ETL to OCSF for you. But what's really cool about OCSF being open sourced, in the OCSF GitHub repo, there's an examples directory. There's mapping examples there that are just, there's more and more of them coming down the path. There's a big one that I don't know if it's gone live yet, of I think 80 or 90 sources that have been mapped when somebody approves that PR finally. So we've got sources coming in. In the middle, right, I hinted, you don't have to go to the S3 console, Glue console, Lake Formation, SQS, any of that to run your Security Lake in a box, your lake in a box, as Jonathan has now coined the term. He's probably said it in some of his posts before, but I'll start using it now. We've got all the data in Security Lake. We have securely written the data. Now, how do we start consuming that data? We're going to focus on federated search here because my first slide was, hey, I want my analytics in my analytics programs, software, whatever, and I want my storage to stay in the same place. So I don't want to move my data, or I want to move minimal data. And then that use case where I'm doing maybe longer term searches, I'm going to federate and go into there. We also have another subscriber model, which is the move model, which is, I get an SQS notification to account B to another subscriber. That account, that software then consumes that data from S3. And that's a pattern that's been around forever. Nothing's changed. You're just now assuming a role with external ID into S3 instead. But we're going to focus on federated search. And let's talk more about this one. What are we really doing? Why? I have a lot of customer conversations where they've got a decently mature logging platform. They either love it and don't want to change, or they're greenfield, or they're in the middle. They're like, it's getting messy. I'm starting to lose track of permissions and models and all of that. And security, like, please help me, right? And so these are a lot of the things that we talk to customers about, of making security like become the central part of your logging strategy. And then how are my systems that depend on logs consuming logs now, right? um, I have the ability to filter as stuff comes in. Lots of other partners can do that too, but I've got the ability to do that. One of the big advantages of the way we are doing AWS logs and the compression that we get with gzip and Parquet, it is 90 plus percent versus what you're getting if you're just like dumping in VPC flow to S3 the old way. I'm not going to hit all of these, right? We can manage all of the S3 lifecycle policies that you want. And if you're in the Security Lake console, it is just the normal policies and transitions that you are used to. We're coordinating on the back end the API calls to set those up in S3. Once you do that, you can go look at them. I'm not going to hide them from you. If you want to change them or filter them a little bit, you can actually go do that. Filter subscriber feeds, federated query, federated search is really about that. But I do have some partners who, if they're doing that S3, that data movement, maybe I don't want everything from CloudTrail to go to my SIM. And so there's some partners out there that can do that. And we're working on some roadmap stuff to do that. Yeah, I think I've talked enough about that slide. As I hinted, sources and subscribers, partners are a big part of this. If you've heard me talk about Secure Lake before, these logos are not just some logos that were slapped on the screen because someone raised their head and said they want to be a partner. These are any partner, whether it's a source or a subscriber, has had to go through a validation process. And data sources have to go through, hey, can I actually write valid OCSF into S3 using the Security Lake roles that I set up, that Security Lake set up for them? And so there is documentation on what they do for each of these. If you go Google Security Lake integrations, you're going to get the whole list. The Gauntlet is the guy in the blue shirt here. I have talked to most of those folks, if not all of them, and work through how to get data into Security Lake with partners. And of course, all of the AWS logs that are on top there. More to come for AWS logs. We keep adding more, keep looking at customers and what they want. And so next slide, we're going to see a query logo. Nice.
Uh-oh.
So I talk about that Gauntlet. Jonathan had to go prove to me that he can actually read OCSF, which I had no doubt of because he's a contributor to OCSF, and all the other a bunch of other folks at Query also are. But just to prove the point, also any of these partners that can read data from Security Lake in OCSF, using either of those methods, whether it's federated query or the S3 method, and then also provide some value. Great, you got logs and I moved them to my system, but show me a dashboard, show me some alerts, show me some threat hunting, show me some playbooks on top of that. And so we've really driven the partners, again, to not just have a logo here, but to have some content and meat and documentation behind all of those. Any comments on that, Jonathan? The gauntlet wasn't too hard, was it?
No, it's not too bad, but it definitely helped improve, and that's part of your superpower at AWS for sure. Because ultimately, it's not just about us as a partner getting our logo up on a slide. It's solving a customer pain, and just like all these other folks there do, right? Like we work with Cripple pretty closely. They have Cripple Search on top of it. We work, down the service partners. Hoop is one of our partners, who could help you set up SecLake and can help you, build out a modern SecDataOps program. So it's for everybody's benefit, the gauntlet. We're happy to have ran it, and we're going to continue running it, especially as we scale up towards like a security competency for like Teeter and whatnot.
Yeah, so thanks for mentioning the service partners. Um, those service partners, they're varied in each of those logos, but some are full blown. We're going to set you up Security Lake. We're going to have daily calls during your POC to make sure we're getting the most value out of that. Hoop is great at that. Um, some of the other partners on the slide we have weekly calls with that they are providing them analytics and utilizing a lot of the programs that they mature programs that they um, have delivered to other customers before, but now they're security lake data, now they're normalized data, now they're utilizing OCSF. So um, if they are one of your partners that you already work with, ask them about security lake, um, and maybe we'll be on the phone together.
Boom.
Next slide.
All right. I think this is my part. So this is a busy slide. We kind of have our overall architecture, if you would, kind of how query works there on the right side. But the most important thing to take away from this is that query enables anybody, right? It doesn't have to be security. It doesn't have to be observability. Anybody, no matter what their skill level, to get answers and make decisions faster. I call it decision enablement, right? If you think kind of like the end of the OODA loop, right, when you're actually trying to decide and act, or if you use like the Odin model, observe, detect, identify, neutralize, right, whatever threat you're neutralizing, that's what query helps you do, right? So we're kind of finding the needle in the haystack. We're finding a specific needle in a big stack of needles, right? So queries federated search is not just us, canning up a bunch of queries into Athena or canning queries or requests into other APIs. We built a full blown query planner, a query execution engine, and then we normalize on the return. So everything inside of query is built on the query data model, which is just OCSF. So whatever main line version of OCSF is out there right now, as of the time of this recording on September 24th, or not time of the recording, we're actually live, but whenever you watch this, we're at the end of September 2024. The current mainline version is OCSF 1.3.0. That's what QDM, Query Data Model, is on, and we try to keep it there. We just have our own custom extension that we manage for a couple customers. So that's really the differentiator, right? But as far as OCSF and Amazon Security Lake is concerned within Query, we automate all the mapping, right? So we're already built on OCSF, so it doesn't matter what version of Amazon Security Lake you're on, because every Security Lake schema version is pinned to a specific version of OCSF, and then sometimes it's pinned to a specific table format, which we'll kind of get into in a couple other slides. So let's say you adopt Security Lake, you work with a partner, or you're an MSSP, and it's like, okay, we turn Security Lake on. I have stuff flowing in here from CrowdStrike FDR, from Sysdig's Falco Sidekick. I have things coming in here from Cribble or Torque or Tines. I have things coming in here from Amazon, from Security Hub that I already configured. Now, what do we do? Do we have to write a bunch of SQL? Do we have to write a bunch of Spark jobs for detections, for analytics? Do we got to dump this into a specific view and then use QuickSight? Or you could use Query, right? So it's all no code, which I know is a buzzword, but it's just a click and point, kind of like using Google search to find specific indicators, find specific events, and I'll let the demo talk to itself when we get to there. We have interactive results and dashboards, so you could filter, window, slice and dice across everything, and it's all parallelized. And you're not charged by query, you're not charged by data ingest. We have a very flat model. You could see it on what the cost is on the AWS marketplace. And it's not just Security Lake, right? We support all the major lake houses, Redshift, Snowflake, or not Redshift, that's on the roadmap though, Snowflake, Databricks, Azure Log Analytics, Sentinel, or we could consume directly from APIs. So you could use that high level finding data alongside the raw logs that are in the Amazon Security Lake. And again, there on the right side, you could either come in through their web app. We have a Splunk app if you prefer to use SPL. We're actually working on a CLI tool called Fuckle, which is follow up query language. And then you could also just use it from the GraphQL API. We look through everything that you have onboarded to fulfill whatever query plan you are. So let's say, hey, I want to find detection finding events that have this specific process or these specific processes and their parent processes implicated. We'll look across all of what you have onboarded. We'll translate the query down to its downstream platform. So whether you're pulling that out of the Security Lake or you're pulling that out of the Defender API, you're pulling that from CrowdStrike FDR, we'll do the filter compaction, we'll do the windowings, we'll execute federated joins if you have them configured, which are essentially, they operate like an outer join. We'll translate all the operators, and then once you get the results, we're bringing it back to an OCSF. But the great thing about using OCSF is that we're able to capture search intent. So if you're telling us, hey, I want to find a source endpoint IP, we already know what that source endpoint IP is called downstream. So it's almost like a two-way normalization and mapping for you. And then when we bring it back, you could filter and cut across it as needed. And if you didn't want to actively search, if you just wanted that top-down view, you could use what we call summary insights, which are like federated dashboards, which will execute top-level queries and bring back all the data available from all the sources you have. And then you could rank order, stack order them, sort on criticality, sort on status, messaging, and whatnot, and then pivot to a search specifically. And we're built on the AWS cloud. Everything has authentication, authorization expressed throughout using OPA. Your stuff is secure with us, and we don't duplicate data. All right, that's another important takeaway, is that we're not putting this in our own lake. We're not putting this in our own Snowflake instance. The search is retain maybe a little bit inside of a Redis cache if we have to execute federated joins and follow-up queries. But then from there, we don't retain that data beyond the term that it's used in. All right. And this is just kind of a redux of an earlier slide that Ross had, right? Where you have your first party AWS logs, be it from Route 53, from Security Hub, from WAF. And then if you are using Security Hub supports a bunch of first party AWS events, Macie, Inspector, Guard Duty, AWS Health, Systems Manager, a bunch of things in Systems Manager, obviously, and anything custom that you're putting into the ASFF. Or you could ingest custom sources using things like AppSync, AppFlow, EventBridge, Amazon Data Firehose, Kinesis, Lambda, whatever it is, to put the data into OCSF, into the lake. And again, no matter what OCSF version it's in, no matter if you're using Iceberg or just regular Glue, Hive, and it doesn't matter how complex your mappings are, if you're using a ton of unmapped, if you're using a ton of profiles, Query will just pick it up right for you and be able to help you search and execute across that. And then for the final slide, we help. Data management is already simplified with Amazon Security Lake. That's why you should use it, because it's taking away all the pipelines, all the ETL, the customization you have to write, at least for commodity sources. Yes, for certain partner sources, for certain of your own custom sources, right? If you're pulling them from appliances or you're modeling your own unique extension inside of the OCSF, there is some groundwork to be done there. But when our partners, Query's partners, AWS's partners, and the AWS themselves are taking care of 80, 90, or even 100% of what you use, it's a no-brainer. But then you have, kind of the follow-on, I don't want to say complexity, but there are some intricacies as well. So Security Lake V1 or SLV1 uses OCSF 1.0.0 release candidate 2. Security Lake V2 uses OCSF 1.0, and it's using Apache Iceberg, which gives you hidden partitioning and time travel and a bit better table management metadata. And in the future, when Security Lake V3 and V4 and so on come out, Who knows what OCSF versions they'll be on? Maybe they still use Iceberg. Maybe they go back to Glue. Maybe they use Apache Hoodie, which I think they should. Or maybe they're using Delta Lake or Apache Pymon or whatever other hot new table format comes out from there. You don't have to worry your analysts, your internal audit, your architects, your net ops, your IT ops, your IT financial management folks. They don't have to learn how to write SQL if they don't want to. They don't have to understand the intricacies of the different table formats or the differences between OCSF. As long as it's in 1.0.0 RC2 and above, Query will always be able to support it. Will always be able to help you simply map, simply search from it without learning any SQL. And then we're also putting in the performance improvements in the front, right? So you can't use Query just to select star from everything. It's not a query abstraction. There's no tricks here. Whatever your search expressions are, whatever you actually want, we're making sure to use the proper operators, functions. We're windowing on time. We're using partition pruning because Athena, you're charged on the data scanned at $5 per terabyte. Even if you're searching across a petabyte scale of data, if you're looking for very specific things, Query is going to help you keep those scan sizes down really low, so your costs ultimately are low, and we're not duplicating the data. So if you have, privacy, regulatory compliance concerns, we're not restoring it somewhere else. We're just allowing you to search it kind of at whatever time periods you want. And eventually we'll even allow you to change the upper limit, because at the end of the day, the individual analyst, could hardly deal with several dozen, let alone several thousand or tens of thousands of events. So we keep those limitations there more for your safety, to keep the cost down and to not overwhelm the analyst, and to help you kind of talk that search on target, as it were. Any indication of when we're going to get a V3, Ross? Putting you on the spot here.
No, not at all.
It was worth a try. All right, so now I'm going to
And
hand it
even if I
over.
did know, I couldn't say, but no.
Yeah, you could tell us, but you'd have to kill us.
Right, virtually.
Virtually kill us. You'd cut our access off.
We're flipping to demo. Is that where we're headed?
Yep. So you could go ahead and share.
All right. So Jonathan doesn't like my not dark view here, but
I swear Athena looks different in dark view. Besides the darkness, obviously.
Many of my other screens are dark. I don't know why that one's in that account is in light mode. All right. So that's not the one I wanted to show you first. So big ugly join, right? And I'm joining on time, just so we can take a look at this. No comments on if this is a good view. No comments if this is something you would normally use. I'm showing you ugly. For folks who are not familiar with Athena and how does it play into Security Lake, I hinted a couple times. Any data coming in, whether it's the AWS sources, whether it's any of those logs or findings from Security Hub or any of the partners you're feeding in there, or any custom sources that were on that slide, or your own custom sources, when they land in S3, Security Lake is going to build up tables for you. So the iceberg tables that Jonathan was talking about, I'm building all that up for you. You don't have to go manage, think about what a glue crawler is or lake formation permissions or any of that. The data shows up. Typically when I'm talking to customers, they've got a new source. They come in, even if they don't love Athena, they just come in here directly and start saying, yep, I got data. Yep, I got data. And then we move on. They just do a little preview, from here and preview the table. Jonathan wanted something ugly, so I found something ugly that I had done many, many moons ago. I made it even uglier by throwing this 7-day timestamp in there. Jonathan, and so I ran that view, right? That's attempting to just look at those fields across all of the 4 data sets that I had put into that view. Jonathan talked too fast. I was trying to make this select from a little bit prettier before he was done talking, but I backed out quickly. I was thinking to getting rid of, when I've got these nulls here, but whatever. We can see how that makes a difference a little bit later on. So we're in Athena. This didn't take long. This took about a minute to do that, across 7 days, across 4 of those tables. So not too bad. Um, Jonathan shared me this one. He said, "Hey, look, we're going to look for top 10 or yeah, top 10. We didn't even do a top 10.
Yeah, it's top
What am I
everything.
top everything? Sorry. Um, one of my top DNS top talkers. That's something that typically my security folks are going to want to know. Um, we didn't, I could filter this down more so it's not AmazonAWS.com. And I could then see more of the Reddit and the Facebook and all of these other things, and Apple. I can tell you that my account is not going to those things. I've got data generators in the back end that are fake going to those so that I actually have some data here. But I think if I was to use this, I would start getting rid of some of the Amazon AWS. But a typical query that you would do, it's not completely ugly. But I think lots of customers use SQL, but we do hear um, a lot in the industry that SOC folks don't know SQL and they don't like it, and there's just a lot of pushback. There's a blog put out, I think yesterday, maybe the day before, that really um, went through what SQL means to your SOC and some really nice queries to actually do that. Jonathan, you know anything about that blog?
No idea. It wasn't me. And if
Yes,
it
it
was
was.
me, if I was there, I was probably asleep.
It was your blog. It was your
Yes,
blog.
it,
Okay.
it was it was DuckDB,
Oh,
so
okay.
you could use SQL locally, but the DuckDB SQL syntax is similar enough to Athena's kind of HiveQL because Athena has a uh, I don't know, it's the progeny of other projects, right? Like PrestoDB and TrinoDB, so HiveQL and all that jazz, which we don't get into, but just know that there are some variations in SQL
Yeah,
syntax out there.
across the
But
board with every
yeah,
time I
it's
go to
not just
any new SQL thing, it's
yeah, it's not just DuckDB and Athena; it's everybody, right? Like
right.
Redshift has its own, Snowflake,
Explode
Databricks.
JSON doesn't work in different places. I'm like,
Yes, yes, it's very true. But I think this is important, Ross, what you're showing, just because it's like, well, if I wanted to look for a specific indicator or look for specific activity across a bunch of different tables and parallelize it, the only way you could do that is with unions, joins, or creating a view. Or I guess you could create a materialized view if you're using Redshift Spectrum as well,
Mhm.
which was the first query that Ross showed. And then this one is a pretty standard aggregation that you would need to do where it's like, hey, I just want to know the top anything, right? It doesn't have to be IPs, it could be host names, right? Where you have to know to, okay, I want to use the count operator, if I want to use select or select distinct, and then how to use group by, how to use order by. And then if you wanted to get the actual rows instead of these summary rows, then you need to use window functions, which I went over in that blog that Ross talked about. So if you're a registrant, I'm sure we will add that. But I'm not a marketer. I'm not smart enough to be a marketer, honestly, because I
So
talk too much.
I found your blog this morning. I bookmarked it, quickly looked at it. I haven't read it yet, so I'll learn some more later today.
Nice,
Um,
yeah.
but I'm really curious about your demo. I want to see. I'm going to see how Query AI. I've seen some earlier stuff when we were working together a couple months ago, but I'm curious to see how cool Query is.
All right. I
I'm gonna
will go to screen share. And let's see. Let's do the window, share the proper one, and boom, away we go. So I am sorry if this looks a little bit scrunched. Um, Maybe that's better. So when you come into query, this is your query instance. So this is my own little dev demo instance. So it's got a lot of stuff in here. So the query has a couple different terms, right, that'll orient you to. Uh, from the top, you have summary insights, which is our federated dashboards. I'll probably load that in later if we have enough time. You have federated search, which is wow, federated search. Then you have connectors. Connectors are your integration points, your connections downstream into different platforms. And we have three different types of connections. We have what we consider static, where we manage the mappings that are very, very simple to onboard. You could think of something like Defender for Endpoint or Sentinel-1 Singularity or CrowdStrike Falcon, right? Where you just give it an API key or an OAuth token or something like that, client ID and client ID secret for Defender, and we'll be bringing back some high level common data, right? Like devices, different findings, and we'll normalize it for you. You'll look in our docs to find out like, okay, what searches presented here. Same thing for like HR platforms, MDM platforms, and whatnot. Then we have a dynamic connector, and a dynamic connector is kind of like, well, Security Lake, right? Or I already have this one up, but let's say you wanted to add a connector, Amazon Athena, Databricks, Snowflake, BigQuery, ServiceNow, Splunk, and you wanted to model a specific table, a specific index, a specific view, you could come into this, right? So let me just orient you actually a little bit better. So for Security Lake, you could see it's asking for a decent amount of stuff, but nothing too crazy, right? You give it an alias, we'll generate an external ID for you. Oops, let me get that back there. You pick a data source. Custom will map anything that you tell us to, or you could pick something that AWS already supports as a first party. That just kind of helps us get at the data quicker because we already know what OCSF classes or event types are inside the table. Account ID, role name, bucket name, database name, table or the view name, where the results bucket is for Athena, or you could give it a workgroup name. You would save this, and then it would generate the policy for you, which is minimum necessary to just get at what it actually needs to get at. And then once you're done there, you would go ahead and test your connector and then fetch a sample is what we call. So you'll get some demo data. Essentially, this just does a select all with a limit 10 to kind of get you what data is inside of the table from here. And then all you need to do for a hybrid schema, so that's what this one is, right? A dynamic schema, you'd have to map the entire thing. But you remember during the demo, I told you that we auto recognize OCSF inside the Amazon Security Lake. So you just need to pick what specific event class you want. So these all come from OCSF. So this is predicated upon having some OCSF knowledge to understand either what events are inside of the table, which if you're using Amazon Security Lake are documented either from the AWS sources directly in the Amazon Security Lake documentation, or if you're using a partner source, ostensibly they would also tell you what event class they're mapping, whatever it is. So in this case, this is the VPC flow log table. It's network activity. That's what all gets mapped in. And the only thing we allow you to control, or we need you to control, are the observables. So observables have their lineage based in a Splunk notable, which can be an indicator of compromise, an indicator of attack, or just a, hey, this is an important thing to look at. So any OCSF observables, we just call them an entity. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an indicator of compromise or attack. It could just be anything interesting, right? So like an AWS account ID is pretty simple. You could map credential IDs, countries, command lines. You're not going to always use every entity all the time. Again, it's predicated upon understanding what's in your data, which is why we give you a preview, or you could search from the downstream data sources. And some of them are easy, right? Like, IP address, source endpoint.ip, destination endpoint.ip. And that's what we were talking about before about the benefits of OCSF. Or if you're seeing this and like, hi, I really don't understand what source endpoint.ip is, you would work with us at Query, our customer success team, myself, a couple others, to help you out with mapping these, or as you learn the schema, or in this case, it's pretty simple because they're one for one, right? Inside of the data model. So once you picked everything, you would just go ahead and save it. Now, if this was a dynamic schema, there would be a lot more options underneath. You'd be able to map out pretty much every single level of depth inside of the finding. And that's important because let's say you're using CIM or ECS, an older version of OCSF downstream, or if you're not using anything, you just got raw JSON that you're dumping from like Suricata Eve JSON, or you're just dumping all of the event findings that are coming out of Okta, Auth0, that's a couple hundred each. If you're just dumping all the CrowdStrike FDR and in their own individual tables, that's 1,200 findings, right? Which is a lot, but it allows you to pick and choose what you want normalized into OCSF, which informs how you could search. So I'll be quiet about this and actually get into the search. So the whole idea behind, well, not the whole idea behind Query, but one of the ideas behind Query is that as you use it, as you map schema, as you get familiar with OCSF, it's a kind of a self-contained feedback loop where you could search by entities and it's like, oh, hey, here's all the entities that I have available that I could search on, and we got some slick iconography. Or you could search for specific events that come from the tables. Now, we'll always give you every possible entity because we're not really going to know all the time what you map into it. But for events, we're only going to allow you to search on stuff that you have mapped. So you can see I have a lot because I have a lot of demo data, right? You could search for API activity like CloudTrail, authentication logs, network logs, or whatnot. Or you could search for a specific, let's say IP address entity, right? And what we're going to do is parallelize this search and translate that search intent downstream. So it's like, hey, I want to get this IP address. Query knows from the CrowdStrike API, from the Defender API, from SentinelOne, from ServiceNow Glide Record, using SQL inside of Databricks or using Kusto query language inside of Sentinel or Azure Log Analytics, how to get at that mapped IP address value. So you don't need to worry about, oh, I forgot what IP address was called in this platform. I forget how to do an equality or a contains operator in KQL or in SQL or in SPL. None of that. We handle all that for you. So in this case, let me just search for, let's bring back some endpoint data. I think I have some demo boxes, some MDM data, and then let's bring back all of SecLake and all of Athena, some other stuff that I have in there. And then we'll search for a couple of them that I totally remember off the top of my head. I'm definitely not looking down at where I got them written down at. And one of these. And then, this is pretty simple, right? Like you're only going to use equality and IP address for right now. And then case sensitivity doesn't matter. And you go ahead and boom and search that. And then that'll go ahead and search all 19 of these all at the same time. So it takes a little bit for this to buffer up. We're built on AWS serverless technologies. So right now we have a bunch of individual containers that are spun up in the background that are going out and looking at it. And then we're starting to window things back. So you could see I already have some matches. I search for IP address, but I'm getting host back. So this is device inventory info, which is your typical SeamDB style event finding where you could get the actual boxes back. And then if you broke these open, you would, see the specific findings like, everything from the device. You would get, the instance IDs, you would get the region, the network zone, specific metadata that came from here, from CrowdStrike and whatnot. And then once it's done, you'll stop getting the spinner. If you had any errors, you would get a red banner up top. Typically, the transient error is like, hey, we searched for this and we couldn't find it in this time window. Please try again. And then in this case, you could filter off. So to orient yourself from the top, you just have your regular old kind of area chart. And you could use this for like eyeball analysis, where it's like, if you're searching for these IPs and maybe you saw a giant spike at a specific time, it's like, why am I getting this specific spike? And we're working on this a little bit. And again, I do apologize. This is my dev box, right? So some of the stuff is, a bit experimental. But hey, if you give us money, you could tell me what to do with these, right? But then all our filtering and everything is built on top of OCSF. So the severity column comes from the severity ID. The message comes from OCSF message. The time is from the time. The activity is normalized from the activity ID. Status is normalized from status ID. So as long as we have it downstream or you map it, we will be able to present it back. We give you the event type, which comes from the class UID, and then your little own connector name so you remember which one it is. Route 53, this is created by one of our devs in the Amazon Security Lake. And then you could actually, go ahead and then filter down and search for, specific things as you need them, right? So you could do a specific time window. You could look for specific activities where it's like, okay, I only want to look for traffic. I could look for status, which we're not getting from the Route 53 table right now, in an event type connector. And then if you wanted to get specific things inside of here, like, hey, I want to get a specific cloud account, or I want to get a specific DNS answer, right? Let's say you're just hunting for these and it's like, some of these are malicious, then you could filter down into it and then search it as you normally would and have everything available to you. And then if you prefer, you could also look at it in raw OCSF form as well, and then use that for your search. Now, let's say, hey, that's good if I know what to start from, but hey, smart guy, I don't know what's in the freaking table. I want to just start from the top level. And it's like, okay, that's fine. What if we just pulled back all the network activity for, let's say, the last 7 days from all these tables? And then we'll go ahead and go and retrieve that. And then this will just dispatch a new set of searches. Remember, none of this data is retained anywhere, right? So that's why we do have to go and fetch it. So you do pay a little bit of a search tax on the front end, but you would do the same thing waiting for an Athena query to come back too. So without the compliance headache on this case. So now we're bringing back all the network. Oh, I'm sorry, Ross.
I'm just saying this is very cool. I like that I can um, do a lot of that filtering once I've got those results back. As you said, where do we all start? We all start with a star, right?
Yeah.
And then in other systems, it's not that easy. Then, at least for me, to start filtering down. Maybe the example that I showed earlier. Um, but this, I like this, the being able to click down. Um, I don't need to teach my folks SQL, right?
Yeah.
If they wanted to, they could, right? But being able to drive into this in a federated model and not bringing or saving another data. I interrupted you, but go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, no. I
I'm
mean,
just
that
excited.
I'm glad that you have that feedback
Mm.
live because Ross, look, this wasn't planned. The last time Ross saw this was our old gen results, our old gen query builder, where we only allowed you to have entities, and the closest approximation we could get to this aggregation was inside of Summary Insights, which I'll pump open a little bit later. But if you wanted, this is the closest thing you could get to a select star, right? Because the idea is I mean,
Yeah.
eventually we'll allow you to build a query where it's like, give me all the events off the top that I have mapped, and that would be the closest you get to a select star. But query is again for those threat hunting use cases, looking for specific tradecraft and behavior, looking for a specific indicator for your security operations folks, or even your security architecture, cloud security folks, where it's like, hey, from our CSPM, from our CNAP, from Wiz, from Electric Eye Security Hub, we're getting these instances back. Let me search for resource ID and see what else is happening with these instances. Ostensibly, you would get back things from Intune if it was onboarded there, from CrowdStrike, from SentinelOne. You get some stuff from ServiceNow. So it's kind of, build your own journey, and you could talk that search down on target where now instead of searching from a specific IP, we're looking at it for all of network activity. You go down a source endpoint, down to specific instance IDs, which are normalized in this case, or specific IP addresses, and then allow you to kind of build out the search from here where it's like, what's going on? But let's say you wanted to have something a bit finer grained. Now let's start from a specific activity. And again, activity ID is a very OCSF like thing, right? Where, hey, I just want to see all fails and refusals across, well, everything I got back, and then execute a new search. So instead of starting from a known indicator or entity, or starting from give me everything, now I want to see everything but within a specific constraint. So we give you different ways to search up and down the schema. So the more familiar you are with OCSF, the more powerful this is. But in my opinion, I'm a power user, I'm an OCSF contributor, so I'm certainly biased. I think it would be a little bit easier to pick up on top of. But in
So
this case, well, no, go ahead.
we can't minimize that this is OCSF class based.
Yeah,
You're picking network activity, and you think of all the things that would go into network activity. Um, Usually, the easiest example for most folks is DNS, right?
yeah,
I've got Route 53, I've got Bind, I've got Microsoft DNS, I've got Cisco Umbrella. I don't have to worry at all about that it's Cisco or AWS or Azure or whatever. I'm just searching DNS activity. I'm just searching network activity.
right.
That to me is powerful. That shines the huge light on normalization and OCSF in particular, because we don't have to think about that anymore.
Right.
My operators, my SOC folks, don't need to know that it's coming from these different AWS or sorry DNS sources. I'm just looking for an IP address. I don't care if it's from Cisco or from Microsoft or AWS. So sorry, it's just exciting to be able to think about it that way.
No, I mean, I'm glad for the live
Yeah.
feedback, right, on the product. That's what we want, right? We want somebody to come in here and be like, yes, I could use this to be able to orient, to be able to, decide and ultimately act, right? I mean, will this specific search in your specific environment give you all the answers? No, but we want to allow you to keep on pivoting and
Mhm.
going down, using the OCSF for what it was intended for, to see likeness and sameness across other things. I mean, you could even do something as crazy as, let's say we want to exit out of this search and instead go back to like something like a host name, right? Where every EC2 instance has its DNS record, contains IP dash. A
Mm.
search like this, a regex XP like IP dash across a bunch of tables in Athena would be
Mm.
crazy expensive. But let's say we just parallelize this search so it's more, quality based where we're looking at every per table instead of doing a giant view, instead of doing a giant join. Now you could start to get even more of these things back. And you could see we have, some of these onboarded with CrowdStrike. We have some of these instances onboarded into Defender. And then with Defender, we also have 2A integration with Intune, which also gives us 2A integration with Enter ID because my test tenant is Microsoft 365 E5. So instead of having to hop around
Yeah.
CrowdStrike console, the Defender console, the Enter Devices console, the Intune console, and looking for all these things, now you have all the data here, and you could see, hey, do I get all of the same sort of telemetry, right? Where it's like now I could see what kind of agent I have running here. I could see what kind of groups are, well, in this case, I don't have any groups for this device, right? I can see the different network interfaces. Whereas Enter ID, might not give you that specific deep level information, but it might give you something different, right? Where you could see how we normalize our unmapped data as custom fields where we're putting them into the device. And it's like, okay, there's not a good analog for is account enabled inside of OCSF, but you could still use that unmapped kind of raw data. And then, the results are still loading here in the back end because it's going to bring back a bunch of stuff.
But I've
But
got data right away. I can now
you,
start. I mean, it's still loading, but I've got data that I can action on immediately.
exactly.
Right.
And again, somebody might be seeing this as like, well, I don't have, maybe I do have Entra and Intune and NDE, but why would I have CrowdStrike too? What if you're an MDR company? What if you're an MSSP? What if you're tier two at a giant company like IHS Market? We had a bunch of subsidiaries, S&P Global, a bunch of subsidiaries, NBC Universal had a bunch of different divisions who all use a bunch of different tools. Now you kind of have this top-down view of equality. And then as long as you set up minimum necessary privileges downstream, instead of pivoting console to console, trying to do the search in SQL, trying to look in a ServiceNow and whatnot, you just add all the data, which could help again with decision enablement. So nothing really else too crazy to see. I'll just try to load up summary insights just to show what it looks like. It's pretty simple. Up at the top, you could be like, show me all the aggregations, or you have your categories. So category is a different thing on top of in OCSF. So categories just describe, well, categories of events, right? App activity, discovery, like inventory, findings, detection findings, data security findings, IAM, like authentication and group management, network activity, like we just looked at, either generalized, HTTP, tunnel, DNS. Remediation is new. That was added in 1.3. So if you wanted to track like torque and tines fired off and you wanted to track what actually happened, or if you have your regular system activity like processes and whatnot. So that's what Summary Insights allows you to do. It gives you a kind of top-down view, and a lot of this stuff is synthetic data. Some of it's real, but if you just wanted to have even a higher level view of like, show me freaking everything. I want to see all of my API activity. I want to see all my authentication that happened across all my different platforms. Be it inside of Entra or Auth0 or whatnot, then you could also start from there. So that's all I had today for the demo, just to show the power. And I know this turned outside of SecLake, but the important thing is there's no SecLake or there's no SQL stuff coming on here. And then if you are a Security Lake customer, and if you wanted to window outside of these things to have the data, if you didn't have the chops or you didn't want to pay for a partner to come in and normalize Enter ID and CrowdStrike and whatnot, put it into the lake, you could keep it alongside using query to kind of open up your left and right peripheral vision to get more results to help make decisions faster. So that's enough yapping for me. I think we're at the top of the hour.
That was great. I clearly need to go back and turn on my query AI tenant and start playing with it more. Excited to see it. Like some of those new dashboards and those new overviews you just showed me. Um, showed us. It's not just mine. um, are really exciting. I think a lot of customers are gonna love being able to use it that way.
All right, awesome. Well, I don't see any audience questions coming in from the audience tab. Eye in the sky, oh powerful one. Have you seen any questions coming in? Maybe he'll put it into the speakers chat.
Negative. So
Negative. All right, no live questions. Well, that was easy. I've been John. That's been Ross. You've been awesome. Stay dangerous, and we'll see you on the next one.
have a good one, everybody.
Goodbye.